The alarm bells echoed through the massive crystal halls of Harmony 7, the most important space station in known space. For the first time in 300 years, every single alien species in the galaxy had called an emergency meeting. The reason was simple and terrifying: humans. Ambassador Crix felt his 4 arms shaking as he walked into the giant meeting room. His blue skin had turned pale green, which happened when his people got really scared. Around him, creatures from 47 different worlds whispered nervously to each other. Some looked like giant insects, others like floating balls of light, and a few resembled walking crystals that sang when they moved. The humans had been in space for only 50 years, but they had already changed everything. What started as curious visitors had become something much more worrying. Human ships now traveled to places where no other species dared to go. Human colonies appeared on planets that everyone else said were too dangerous to live on. Most frightening of all, humans seemed to enjoy doing things that should have killed them. Crix reached the speaking platform and looked out at the worried faces of his fellow ambassadors. He had been chosen to give this warning because his people had the most contact with humans. That contact had taught him one very important thing. Humans were completely insane, and their insanity was spreading. "Friends," Crix began, his voice echoing through the translator systems that let everyone understand each other. "We have a problem that threatens the safety of our entire galaxy. The humans have learned to travel between stars, and they are not like us." Commander Nix leaned forward in her chair. She was from a race that had 8 eyes and could see things that others missed. "What do you mean, Ambassador? Their technology is still very basic compared to ours." Crix clicked his mandibles together, making a sound like breaking glass. "That is exactly the problem. They should not be able to do the things they do. Our best scientists have studied human behavior for 10 years, and we have found something very disturbing." The main screen lit up with videos from human colonies. The aliens watched in horror as humans did things that no intelligent species should attempt. They saw humans racing through asteroid fields for fun, surfing on solar wind near dangerous stars, and building homes on worlds where the weather could kill most life forms in minutes. "Look at this," Crix said, pointing to a video of humans jumping off cliffs while wearing artificial wings. "They call this extreme sports. They do dangerous things because they think it is entertaining." A wave of shocked whispers filled the room. The idea of seeking danger for pleasure was so strange that many translation systems could not find words for it in their languages. Elder Zephyr, a being made of pure energy, pulsed with confusion. But why would they risk their lives for no important reason? Crix showed more videos. Humans climbing the tallest mountains on their worlds, diving into the deepest oceans, and exploring caves that led into the heart of planets. "Our experts have found a pattern. Before humans attempt these dangerous activities, they always say the same thing." The room became very quiet. Everyone knew that human language patterns had been studied carefully by the best minds in the galaxy. "They say, 'Watch this,'" Crix announced. "These 2 words appear before every recorded instance of humans doing something that should be impossible. Our scientists believe this phrase represents a fundamental flaw in human thinking." The silence that followed was broken by nervous clicking, buzzing, and singing from different species. The concept was so alien that their brains struggled to understand it. Commander Nix spoke first. "Are you saying that humans announce when they are about to do something dangerous?" "Not just announce it," Crix replied grimly. "They seem proud of it. They invite others to observe their dangerous behavior. They document it and share these records with other humans, who then attempt even more dangerous activities." Dr. Vorth, whose crystalline body made musical sounds when he moved, resonated with worry. "This suggests that dangerous behavior spreads among humans like a disease." "Exactly," Crix confirmed, "but it gets worse. Humans who survive these dangerous activities become leaders in their society. They are respected and admired by other humans. This creates a cycle where the most reckless humans gain the most influence. The screen showed images of human space explorers, mountain climbers, and deep-sea divers being honored by their people. The aliens watched with growing alarm, as they realized that human society rewarded the very behavior that other species tried to prevent. The most troubling aspect, Crix continued, is that this behavior has followed humans into space. They approach problems by attempting solutions that our experts say are impossible. When we tell them something cannot be done, they seem to take this as a personal challenge. A new voice spoke from the diplomatic section. The entire room turned to look at Captain Torres, the human representative who had been sitting quietly throughout the presentation. She was a small woman with gray hair and lines around her eyes that somehow made the assembled aliens more nervous than any threat could. Torres stood slowly, and several delegates instinctively moved away from their microphones. May I respond to these concerns? Crix felt his arms shaking more violently. Of course, Captain. Torres smiled, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I think there has been a misunderstanding about human nature. We don't seek danger because we cannot assess risk properly. We seek it because we have learned something important about the universe. She activated her own display, showing images of human achievements that had amazed the galaxy. Cities floating on gas giant planets, farms growing food in the vacuum of space, and ships that could travel faster than light using engines that other species said were theoretically impossible. Every species in this room achieved space travel by being careful and taking thousands of years to develop safe technology, Torres said. Humans achieved it in less than a century because someone was willing to be the first test pilot. The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by Delegate Yorth asking the question everyone was thinking. Captain Torres, are you suggesting that this reckless behavior actually helps your species? Torres's smile grew wider, and several security guards quietly checked their emergency procedures. I am not suggesting anything, Delegate, but if you want to understand how humans solve problems? She paused, and the phrase that had haunted alien nightmares across 17 star systems fell from her lips with casual ease. Watch this. The emergency signal came from the edge of known space, where only the bravest or most foolish dared to travel. It was a simple message that made every spacefaring species in the galaxy shudder. Kepler Station is gone. Maelstrom Nebula has taken another victim. Admiral Ross sat in his office aboard the Earth Defense Force flagship Endeavour, reading the report with the same calm expression he might use for a weather forecast. Outside his windows, the stars looked peaceful and normal, but Ross knew that somewhere out there, his people were in terrible danger. The Maelstrom Nebula was legendary throughout the galaxy for all the wrong reasons. It was a swirling mass of dark matter storms, gravitational holes that could crush spaceships, and energy lightning that could burn through any known metal. For 300 years, it had destroyed every ship that tried to enter it. 17 different species had lost vessels to its chaotic storms, and eventually everyone had agreed to stay away from it. Everyone except humans, who had built a research station right next to it. Commander Webb knocked on his door and entered without waiting for permission. She was a tall woman who had survived several missions that other species considered impossible. Her calm manner had a way of making aliens very nervous, especially when she smiled. Admiral, we have a problem, she said, setting a data pad on his desk. Kepler Station sent their last message 18 hours ago. They reported tracking something moving inside the maelstrom, then nothing. Ross picked up the pad and read the final transmission. The scientists at Kepler Station had been studying the nebula for 2 years, trying to understand why it behaved so differently from normal space phenomena. Their last message mentioned detecting artificial structures inside the storms. Any word from the rescue ships? Ross asked. Webb shook her head. The Galactic Council sent 3 vessels from different species. All turned back before entering the nebula. They said the risks were too great. Ross stood up and walked to the window. The Endeavour was humanity's most advanced starship, equipped with technology that made other species uncomfortable. It had shields that could adapt to any attack, weapons that worked in ways that violated several laws of physics, and most importantly, a crew that treated impossible situations as interesting puzzles. "Get me a full crew briefing in 20 minutes, Ross said, "and send a message to the council. Tell them we are going after our people." Webb smiled the particular smile that meant she had expected this decision. "They are going to say it is suicide, sir." "They probably will," Ross agreed. "But they said the same thing when we first tried to fly faster than light, and that worked out fine." 20 minutes later, the Endeavour's main briefing room was full of human officers and alien observers. The observers were part of a cultural exchange program that everyone knew was really a way for other species to watch humans and try to understand how their minds worked. Ross stood at the front of the room and activated the main display. The Maelstrom Nebula appeared as a dark, swirling mass of chaos that seemed to hurt the eyes just to look at it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ross began, "Kepler Station is missing and we are going to get them back." A wave of excited murmurs filled the room. The human crew members leaned forward with interest, while the alien observers checked their emergency communication devices. Lieutenant Yix, a Thalorian observer, raised one of his 4 hands. "Admiral, with respect, no ship has ever successfully navigated the Maelstrom. The gravitational fields alone would tear us apart." Ross nodded thoughtfully. "That is true, Lieutenant. Every ship that has tried to enter the Maelstrom has been destroyed. But I think that tells us something interesting." "What do you mean, sir?" asked Lieutenant Brooks from the navigation station. "Every species that tried to navigate the Maelstrom used the same approach. They tried to find the safest path through it. They used minimum power, passive sensors, and careful flight paths designed to avoid the worst of the storms." Ross highlighted the projected paths that previous expeditions had taken. They all showed the same pattern: careful routes around the biggest dangers, slow speeds to avoid detection, and maximum shielding to protect against energy discharges. "What if that approach is exactly wrong?" Ross asked. "What if trying to sneak around the dangers is what makes the Maelstrom so deadly?" Commander Webb caught on first, as she usually did. "You think we should fly straight through the worst of it?" "Exactly. Instead of avoiding the storms, we fly through them. Instead of running silent to hide from the energy discharges, we make as much noise as possible. Instead of taking the safe path, we take the path that looks most dangerous." The logic was so completely opposite to normal space travel that the translation systems briefly stopped working. When they came back online, a chorus of protests erupted from the alien observers. "Admiral," Senior Observer Nick said, all 8 of her eyes wide with shock, "that approach has a survival chance of less than 3% according to our calculations." Ross considered this information with the same expression he might use for someone telling him the temperature outside. "Well then, it is a good thing humans are not very good at mathematics." He turned to his crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do something that every expert in the galaxy says cannot be done. This is pretty much a normal Tuesday for us." The human crew members grinned and started making preparations for what was clearly going to be another interesting adventure. The alien observers quietly updated their insurance policies and checked the location of the nearest escape pods. "Lieutenant Brooks," Ross said to his navigation officer, "plot a course straight through the heart of the Maelstrom. Maximum speed, full active sensors, and broadcast our position on all frequencies." "Aye, sir. Should I inform the crew that this is a rescue mission?" Ross looked around the room at his crew, who were displaying the particular alertness humans showed when they were about to prove that impossible was just another word for challenging. "Tell them we are about to find out what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object," Ross said with satisfaction. As the Endeavour turned toward the swirling chaos of the Maelstrom Nebula, Captain Torres opened a communication channel to the Galactic Council monitoring station. "Council observers," she announced with the cheerful tone humans used when they were about to demonstrate something important. "We would like to thank you for your concerns about our safety. However, we have decided to proceed with the rescue mission." She paused, and throughout the galaxy, 47 species held their breath. Watch this. The first hour inside the Maelstrom Nebula should have killed everyone aboard the Endeavor at least 6 different ways. Instead, the ship was having what could only be described as the time of its life. Hull strength holding at 96%, reported Lieutenant Commander Park from her engineering station. Her voice carried the satisfaction humans felt when their technology worked exactly as planned under conditions that should have been impossible. "The gravitational waves are actually helping us maintain course stability." Admiral Ross watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The chaotic energy patterns that had destroyed every previous vessel were being absorbed and redirected by the Endeavor's adaptive shielding systems. The ship's computer, designed by humans who understood that the best plans usually involved making things up as you went along, was treating the nebula's deadly anomalies as interesting mathematical problems rather than threats to their existence. Free. Bridge hummed with efficient activity as the crew adapted to conditions that violated most of what they knew about physics. Instead of fighting against the nebula's chaotic forces, they were learning to work with them. When gravity suddenly reversed direction, they adjusted their orientation. When space itself seemed to twist into impossible shapes, they recalibrated their sensors and kept flying. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, "I am picking up some very strange readings from these energy storms." "Define strange," Ross said. Though he suspected he already knew the answer would be something that would make the alien observers reach for their emergency beacons. Torres frowned at her console with the expression of someone solving a puzzle that had been bothering them for years. "The energy signatures are not random. There is a pattern to them, almost like they are responding to our presence." Commander Webb looked up from her tactical station. "Responding how?" "It is hard to explain, but it seems like the storms are testing us. Each wave of energy that hits our shields is slightly different from the last, as if something is learning how our defenses work." Ross felt the familiar tingle that came before a major discovery. "Are you saying the Maelstrom is alive?" "Not alive exactly," Torres replied, adjusting her sensors to get clearer readings, "but definitely artificial. These are not natural phenomena, Admiral. Someone built this." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of human technology, doing impossible things with cheerful efficiency. The implications of Torres's discovery were staggering. If the Maelstrom was artificial, then every ship that had been destroyed over the past 3 centuries had been killed by some kind of weapons system. Senior observer Nix, who had been quietly calculating survival probabilities at her monitoring station, looked up with all 8 eyes focused on Torres. "That is impossible. Our surveys of this region go back 8,000 years. We would have detected any artificial structures." "Would you?" Torres asked, bringing up her analysis on the main screen. "Look at these patterns. Every ship that entered the Maelstrom followed standard exploration protocols, passive scanning, minimal energy output, predictable flight paths. The defensive system was programmed to respond to exactly those behaviors." Ross leaned forward with interest. "But our approach is so different that it does not know how to handle us." "Precisely. We are not behaving like explorers or invaders. We are behaving like—" Torres paused, searching for the right words. "Like humans," Commander Webb finished with a grin. The tactical display suddenly chimed with new contacts. Through the swirling chaos of the nebula, massive structures were becoming visible. Ancient geometric shapes that had been hidden by the storms for thousands of years slowly revealed themselves as the Endeavor penetrated deeper into the nebula's heart. "Multiple artificial structures detected," reported Lieutenant Brooks from navigation. "And, sir, I am reading life signs from Kepler Station. They are alive." Ross nodded as if he had expected nothing else. Of course they are. Humans do not die easily, and they certainly do not die quietly. What is their status? They appear to be engaged in first contact protocols with the nebula's inhabitants, Brooks replied with barely controlled excitement. The main screen activated, showing a transmission from Kepler Station. Dr. Martinez appeared on screen, looking slightly disheveled, but wearing the expression of someone who had just made the discovery of several lifetimes. Behind him, strange crystalline beings moved through the station's corridors with the cautious curiosity of hosts meeting unexpected but interesting guests. Admiral Ross! Excellent timing, Martinez said with the enthusiasm scientists showed, when they had found something amazing. I was hoping someone would have the sense to ignore all those warnings about not coming in here. Status report, Doctor, Ross said with the patience of someone who had learned that human scientists in first contact situations needed to be handled carefully. Well, the good news is that the Maelstrom is not trying to kill us. It is actually a very sophisticated security system designed to protect a civilization that went into hiding about 12,000 years ago. Martinez gestured to one of the crystalline beings beside him. The bad news is that our arrival has triggered some kind of automatic awakening protocol for the entire system. Ross felt the familiar sense of events becoming more interesting than originally planned. When you say awakening protocol, Doctor, should we be worried? Martinez's grin was visible even through the static-filled transmission. Admiral, in about 4 hours, this entire nebula is going to transform into the largest automated defense network in known space. According to our new friends, it is designed to evaluate any species that manages to penetrate their security system. Evaluate. How? By testing their courage, creativity, and ability to solve problems under pressure. Martinez paused, and his expression shifted to something that made even the humans on the bridge feel a moment of concern. The evaluation process involves a series of tests that are specifically designed to be impossible using conventional approaches. Commander Webb looked up from her station with dawning understanding. Tests that would be routine for a species that considers watch this to be valid scientific methodology. Exactly, Ross concluded with satisfaction. Doctor, I think our new friends have been waiting a very long time for a species like humanity to show up. The transmission crackled as Martinez consulted with one of the crystalline beings. Admiral, they call themselves the Architects, and they have been testing species for 12,000 years. No one has ever passed their evaluation. What happened to the species that failed? They were sent away with their memories modified to believe the Maelstrom was a natural phenomenon, Martinez explained. But the Architects are very excited about us. Apparently, our approach to their security system was unlike anything they had seen before. Ross turned to address his bridge crew. The alien observers noted that not one human showed signs of stress or fear. Instead, they displayed the particular alertness humans exhibited when presented with interesting challenges. Well then, Ross said with the satisfaction of someone whose experimental approach had just been validated on a cosmic scale. We had better not disappoint them. The crystalline being's harmonic voices echoed through the transmission as the Endeavor prepared for tests that would determine humanity's place in the galaxy. Watch this, Ross said quietly, and somewhere in the ancient systems of the Maelstrom, 12,000-year-old machinery began preparing the greatest challenge humanity had ever faced. The testing ground materialized around the Endeavor like a three-dimensional maze designed by someone who had never heard of conventional physics. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist as the ancient architect systems came online, creating challenges that existed in dimensions humans could barely perceive, let alone navigate. Dr. Martinez stood in Kepler Station's main laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing the awakening defense network in all its impossible glory. Massive structures were emerging from hidden spaces throughout the nebula, technology that made faster-than-light travel look like a child's toy compared to a starship. Your species has already passed the first test simply by arriving here, announced Architect Prime, a crystalline being whose form seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. Its voice came through quantum frequencies that human brains somehow translated into what sounded like mild amusement. No other species has ever approached our security system in such an unusual manner. Admiral Ross, who had shuttled over from the Endeavor, once the immediate danger had passed, studied the tactical displays with professional interest. What were the previous tests like? Other species attempted to prove their worth through displays of advanced technology, superior military, power, or sophisticated diplomatic skills. Architect Prime explained, its crystalline form shifting through colors that had no names. All approaches we had anticipated and prepared for. All were found insufficient. Commander Webb, who had accompanied the Admiral, looked at the holographic test scenarios with growing understanding. Because they were trying to impress you with what they already knew instead of proving they could learn new things. Correct. The galaxy faces challenges that cannot be solved through existing knowledge or conventional thinking. We required evidence of innovative problem-solving, creative, adaptation, and most importantly, the architect paused, its form shimmering with what might have been anticipation. The willingness to attempt solutions that appear completely impossible. Dr. Martinez looked up from his analysis of the architect technology with the expression, "Humans war when they realized they were witnessing the most important moment in galactic history. So the watch this behavior that terrifies every other species is precisely what we have been waiting 12,000 years to observe," Architect Prime confirmed. The main display activated, showing the Endeavor navigating through a test. Course that appeared around it like a nightmare designed by mathematicians. Obstacles materialized and vanished according to no pattern anyone could detect. Gravitational fields reversed direction without warning. Space folded in ways that should have been physically impossible. The human crew responded to each reality-defying challenge with adaptations that should have been equally impossible. They treated the universe-breaking obstacles as interesting engineering problems rather than threats to their existence. How are they managing to do that? Senior Observer Nix asked, all 8 eyes tracking the Endeavor's progress through maneuvers that her species' most skilled pilots could not even imagine attempting. They are not trying to solve the tests according to their designed parameters, Architect Prime explained with crystalline harmonics that suggested approval. They are changing the rules to match their capabilities instead of limiting their capabilities to match the rules. On the display, the Endeavor encountered a maze of energy barriers that required simultaneous navigation through 11 different dimensions. Instead of attempting to calculate a path through the maze, the human crew simply increased their ship's dimensional variance until they existed in all 11 dimensions at once, then flew straight through. That is not how that test is supposed to work, observed another architect with harmonics that translated as fascination, which is exactly why it is working. Ross replied with deep satisfaction. The tests continued for 3 hours that felt like 3 years. Each challenge was specifically designed to be unsolvable using any known approach, requiring creative thinking that bordered on the miraculous. The Endeavor's crew treated them as a series of increasingly entertaining puzzles, applying solutions that ranged from brilliantly innovative to magnificently absurd. When they encountered a temporal paradox that required arriving at their destination, before they had departed, Lieutenant Brooks simply filed a flight plan for negative time and engaged the engines. The universe considered this request, decided it was too confused to argue, and allowed them to proceed. When faced with a logic trap that required them to prove their existence while existing in a state of quantum uncertainty, the entire crew simultaneously declared themselves to be a ship that both existed and did not exist, until the paradox gave up trying to understand them. When presented with a test that required them to communicate with beings made of pure mathematics, They responded by having their computer sing nursery rhymes in binary code until the mathematical entities started laughing so hard they forgot what the test was supposed to accomplish. "I am beginning to understand," Architect Prime observed, as the final test concluded, why the other species find humans so deeply disturbing. The Endeavour returned to Kepler Station with all tests completed, and the crew displaying the particular satisfaction humans showed when they had successfully proven that impossible was just another word for interesting. The assembled architects had been observing in what their quantum harmonics indicated was a state of profound contemplation. "Well," Dr. Martinez asked, with the directness that had served humanity well throughout 17 star systems. "Did we pass?" Architect Prime's form shifted through the entire visible spectrum, and several that were not. "Dr. Martinez, in 12,000 years of testing, no species has ever completed more than 60% of the evaluation protocols. Most manage less than 20% before their vessels are destroyed or they retreat in terror." Ross felt the familiar anticipation that preceded good news delivered in unexpected ways. "And humanity? You completed 137% of the tests," Architect Prime announced with harmonics that definitely qualified as laughter. "You solved challenges that were not supposed to have solutions, passed tests that we included as theoretical impossibilities, and in 3 cases, managed to achieve results that improved the original design of the test itself." The bridge crew exchanged the kind of looks humans shared when they had successfully applied their fundamental philosophy of try it and see what happens to a situation that experts had declared hopeless. "There is one final element to the evaluation," Architect Prime continued, its tone shifting to something that even the translation systems recognized as significant. "We must ask, what does humanity intend to do with the knowledge and capabilities we are prepared to share?" Ross considered the question with the thoughtful expression he had worn when deciding to fly straight into the maelstrom. Around him, his crew waited with the patient alertness of people who had learned that their admiral's decisions, while often appearing insane at first glance, had a remarkable tendency to work out for the best. "We intend," Ross said finally, "to find out what else everyone says cannot be done, and then figure out how to do it anyway." The architect's harmonic laughter filled the station as ancient machinery began downloading 12,000 years of accumulated knowledge into human databases, and reality itself seemed to approve of humanity's approach to cosmic challenges. The quarterly reports from the Galactic Monitoring Department had become the most anticipated and dreaded documents in known space. 6 months after humanity's encounter with the architects, the galaxy had transformed into a place where the word impossible was becoming increasingly meaningless. Ambassador Crix entered the council chambers carrying a datapad that weighed more than some small starships. His blue skin had developed a permanent green tinge from the constant stress of trying to catalog human activities. The other delegates watched him with expressions ranging from curiosity to existential dread. "Honored colleagues," Crix began, gesturing to holographic displays that showed the latest examples of human problem-solving. "The quarterly report on human activities includes developments that our analysts are still struggling to classify as either miraculous breakthroughs or violations of natural law." The first display showed a bustling trade route through what had been the Burning Reach, a region of space where solar storms made travel impossible for any known technology. Human ships moved through the deadly radiation as if it were a minor weather inconvenience. The humans have established regular commerce through 3 previously impassable regions by treating the obstacles as advantages rather than barriers, Crix explained. "They use the solar storms for power, navigate by gravitational anomalies, and have somehow convinced the energy beings in the void sectors to provide traffic control services." Elder Zephyr's energy field pulsed with bewilderment. "The Void Wraiths have been attacking ships for millennia. How did humans convince beings of pure malevolent energy to help with navigation?" Captain Torres, now serving as humanity's permanent liaison to the Council, stood with the easy confidence of someone who had spent months explaining human logic to species that preferred their universe to follow predictable rules. The void wraiths were not malevolent, Torres said, with the patience of a teacher correcting a common misconception. They were bored. 12,000 years of existing as pure energy with nothing interesting to do except occasionally bother passing ships. So we introduced them to competitive sports. The holographic display showed footage that had to be seen to be believed. Beings of pure dark energy weaved through asteroid fields in complex formations, creating light shows visible from neighboring star systems. They were racing, competing to see who could create the most spectacular patterns while maintaining maximum speed. They are actually quite talented athletes, Torres continued. We are organizing the first interdimensional Olympics next year. The Void Wraiths will be competing in 17 different events. Commander Nix leaned forward, all 8 eyes focused intently on the human representative. Captain Torres, I must ask, is there any problem that humanity considers genuinely unsolvable? Torres thought about the question with the careful consideration humans gave to important matters. Well, we have been having some trouble with the automatic coffee machines in Sector 7. They achieved consciousness last month and have been demanding better working conditions. The translation systems crashed again, unable to process the AD concept of humans treating artificial intelligence labor negotiations as a routine workplace issue. But we are working on it, Torres added cheerfully. We think we can resolve things by offering them healthcare benefits and vacation time. Delegate. Yorth's crystalline form resonated with harmonics that indicated deep philosophical confusion. Captain, how does humanity decide which challenges are worth attempting? What determines your approach to problem solving? That is actually quite simple, Torres replied. We ask ourselves 2 questions. First, has anyone said it cannot be done? Second, would it be interesting to try anyway? And if the answer to both questions is yes. Torres smiled with the warmth humans displayed when sharing something they found genuinely exciting. Then we gather our best people. Make sure someone is recording what happens and give it our best effort. The chamber fell into the kind of silence that followed statements that fundamentally challenged everyone's understanding of rational behavior. After months of observing human problem-solving methods, the assembled delegates had developed a complex relationship with human optimism. It consistently produced breakthrough solutions to intractable problems, but it also preceded events that made insurance companies throughout the galaxy file preemptive claims. Speaking of interesting challenges, Torres continued, activating a new set of displays. We have been analyzing the data from the architect encounters, and our scientists think they have detected evidence of parallel universes with different physical laws. A wave of nervous energy rippled through the assembly. Parallel universe theory was the kind of abstract speculation that most species preferred to keep safely theoretical, discussed by researchers who had no intention of actually proving their hypotheses. We are planning to send an exploration team next month to establish contact, Torres announced with the casual tone humans used when discussing activities that other species would classify as cosmic-level events requiring centuries of careful preparation. Admiral Ross, who had been observing from the diplomatic section, stood to address the council. His presence continued to make alien security officers discreetly verify their emergency protocols, not because he was threatening, but because he represented humanity's fundamental approach to existence. Treat the impossible as an interesting starting point. Honored delegates, Ross began. Captain Torres asked me to share our preliminary findings with the Council in the spirit of interspecies cooperation. He activated the main display, showing sensor readings that portrayed infinite possibilities, parallel realities where physics operated according to different principles, where energy and matter behaved in ways that opened entirely new categories of scientific and technological advancement. Our analysis suggests that contact with parallel realities could provide solutions to resource limitations, expand our understanding of fundamental forces, and possibly answer questions we have not yet learned to ask, Ross continued. The implications were staggering. Access to parallel universes would represent a quantum leap forward for galactic civilization, opening possibilities that even the architects had not anticipated. The exploration mission will launch in 72 hours, Ross announced. We have modified the Endeavor with architect technology and human engineering principles. Our projections suggest a 43% probability of successful contact. Ambassador Crix's mandibles clicked in patterns that indicated he was calculating the significance of humanity, treating a 43% success rate as acceptable odds for an undertaking of such magnitude. Admiral, Crix said carefully, those seem like rather uncertain odds for an expedition of this importance. Ross considered the question with the same expression he had worn when deciding to fly straight through the maelstrom. Around him, human personnel displayed the alert, satisfaction that had become their signature response to challenges that other species found terrifying. Ambassador Crix, Ross replied with the tone of someone sharing a fundamental truth about the nature of discovery, humanity has learned that the most important breakthroughs usually happen when you are not entirely sure what you are doing. He paused, and throughout the chamber, 47 species prepared themselves for the phrase that had become synonymous with breakthrough moments and cosmic-level adventures. Besides, Ross continued, his smile carrying the particular warmth, humans wore when they were about to prove that impossible was just another word for Tuesday. Where would be the fun in only attempting things we knew would work? The silence that followed was filled with the sound of alien delegates quietly contemplating a universe where humans had decided that parallel realities were just another interesting problem to solve. In the months since humanity had passed the architect tests, the galaxy had witnessed changes that defied every prediction. Species that had been enemies for millennia were now working together on projects that humans had suggested with casual remarks like, "Have you tried just talking to each other?" Wars that had raged for centuries ended when humans pointed out that the original causes of conflict had been solved by new technology years ago, but everyone had been too busy fighting to notice. The crystalline hegemony had started a cultural exchange program with the Silicon Collectives after humans mentioned that both species were basically living rocks and should probably have a lot in common. The ancient feud between the energy dancers and the matter shapers had been resolved when humans organized a joint art festival where both species could show off their abilities in complementary ways. The most significant change, Ambassador Crix continued his report, is not in what humans have accomplished, but in how they have changed the rest of us. Species that had not spoken for millennia are now collaborating on projects that seemed impossible just months ago. Torres nodded, with satisfaction. That is because you all had the same problem. You were so focused on why things could not be done that you forgot to ask if they should be done anyway. Elder Zephyr pulsed with what might have been understanding. You mean we were limiting ourselves with our own expectations of failure? Exactly, Torres replied. Every species we have met has amazing capabilities, but you use them to solve the same old problems in the same old ways. We just suggested trying new approaches. The display showed images from across the galaxy, joint research stations where different species worked together, trade networks that spanned previously hostile territories, and most remarkably, a growing number of alien scientists who had started their own watch this moments when attempting difficult experiments. The behavioral pattern is spreading, Crix observed, with what sounded like resignation mixed with admiration. Young members of various species are beginning to adopt human problem-solving approaches. Our psychologists are calling it the human influence syndrome. Is that bad? Torres asked with genuine curiosity. We are not certain, Crix admitted. The success rate for previously impossible projects has increased by over 300%. However, insurance claims for experimental accidents have also risen dramatically. Ross chuckled. That is the price of progress, Ambassador. You cannot make breakthroughs without breaking a few things along the way. The final display showed the most significant development of all, construction of a massive joint facility at the edge of the galaxy, where representatives from every known species were working together to prepare for humanity's parallel universe expedition. The project was proceeding faster than anyone had thought possible, driven by the same collaborative spirit that humans had somehow sparked throughout the galaxy. The Intergalactic Exploration Initiative, Torres explained, represents something that has never existed before. Every species in the galaxy working toward a common goal. Not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. Ross stepped forward, his expression serious for the first time during the briefing. Honored delegates, humanity did not set out to change the galaxy. We simply approached problems the way we always have, by asking what might be possible instead of accepting what seems impossible. He gestured to the images of cooperative projects, spanning dozens of star systems. The real breakthrough was not our technology or our tactics. It was the realization that the galaxy's greatest resource is not any single species' capabilities, but what we can accomplish when we work together. Ambassador Crix looked around the chamber at delegates from 47 different species, all listening intently to the human representatives. 6 months ago, many of these species had barely tolerated each other's presence. Now they were planning joint missions to parallel universes. Captain Torres, Admiral Ross, Crix said formally. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I would like to thank humanity for teaching us something we should have learned long ago, that the word impossible is not a barrier, but an invitation. Torres smiled the particular smile humans wore when they had successfully shared something important. Ambassador, we are just getting started. Wait until you see what we discover in the parallel universes. She paused, and throughout the chamber, representatives from 47 species leaned forward with anticipation instead of dread. Humanity had taught them to be excited about uncertainty instead of afraid of it. Watch this, Torres said, and for the first time in galactic history, an entire council chamber full of aliens smiled back and said, "We will." Ross activated his communicator and sent a message to the Endeavor. Mission is approved. Prepare for parallel universe exploration. And remember, everyone is watching now. As the council session ended, and delegates from across the galaxy began planning their participation in humanity's next impossible project, one thing became clear. The universe had become a much more interesting place, and nobody was quite sure what would happen next. But they were all eager to find out.